Go inside the Crimson Tide. TiderInsider TV with Rodney Orr and Gary Harris.
Alabama softball coach Pat Murphy is out and is headed to rival LSU.
Sad and shocked. Nobody seemed to see this one coming.
Murphy was officially introduced as the head softball coach at LSU this afternoon.
I can't believe that I'm standing up here. It's an incredible honor.
Alabama has found softball coach Pat Murphy's replacement. It's Pat Murphy. Only days after accepting the LSU job, Murphy announced this evening he had a change of heart.
Coach Murphy never really felt comfortable making the move, and he said the hardest part of leaving Alabama and taking the LSU job was calling his Crimson Tide players and telling them of his decision.
Well, I screwed up. I made a mistake, and that's the bottom line.
Not reality TV, not a soap opera, just Alabama softball. And believe it or not, that was just a span of 5 days. What a wild, wild week it's been for Alabama softball. Good evening, everybody, and welcome into TiderInsider TV, presented by Buffalo Rock. Tonight we're enjoying Diet Pepsi alongside Rodney Orr from TiderInsider.com. I'm Gary Harris. Also on the program tonight, Alabama football coach Nick Saban on Corey Grant's transfer, new SEC legislation, and the possibility of paying college athletes. But first, softball. Coach Pat Murphy accepted the LSU job on Thursday, was introduced on Friday, and Saturday he was in Baton Rouge and it all sank in. Then on Sunday, he informed both LSU and Alabama officials of his desire to return to Tuscaloosa. Alabama officials said, come on. And Monday, for the first time, he talked about his change of heart. Our John Huddleston begins TITV's extensive coverage.
And I could barely get through her call.
Softball coach Pat Murphy says he should have known it was a mistake to leave for LSU the moment he phoned upcoming Tide senior Cassie Riley-Boscia and informed her of his decision.
And the first thing she says to me is, Murph, are you doing okay? And, that just, it stuck with me the whole weekend. And I kept thinking about the seniors, what a great class we had. And then I kept thinking about the kids coming in. And, the biggest thing that hit me was I'm not going to be able to get to coach them.
The reason Murphy left in the first place is a source of speculation. Was it LSU's offer to make him one of the highest paid coaches in the country? Was it that he felt underappreciated by the UA administration? Murphy will only say the decision was one made out of haste, one that came only days after a disappointing end to a season.
And then the phone call came, and it was from LSU, and their AD said, this is the one call only I want to make. And now you go from the dumps to the sky high. It was a too quick decision, and I got caught up in it, and it snowballed, and I didn't think it through, and I made a mistake, and I didn't realize it until, halfway through the weekend.
Murphy adds he accepts full responsibility for his actions.
I screwed up. I made a mistake, and, that's the bottom line.
And while the coach says it will take time to mend fences and heal hearts, regaining the trust of his fans and his players is his top priority. So far, most seem to be receptive to the possibility.
I got one of the coolest emails from a lady that works at the Alabama Credit Union, and she actually had written a prayer for me. And who writes a prayer for a softball coach?
In Tuscaloosa, John Huddleston, WVUA Sports.
A roller coaster of emotions for Patrick Murphy and Allison Habits, his associate head coach, who was going with him to LSU, then came back with him to Alabama. It's been a wild story for us too, but at the end of the day, he's back at Alabama. He is the softball coach. Rodney, your thoughts on all of this and his comments, once he returned to Alabama and met with reporters yesterday?
Well, first of all, your first initial reaction was, Patrick Murphy
is Alabama softball.
You just couldn't imagine him leaving, the way he did. And again, it was just unimaginable. It's hard to swallow, quite honestly. I know the softball community was, as you mentioned, in complete shock, Gary. But, I think it's great that Alabama welcomed him back with open arms. Again, he's the guy that has gotten Alabama to the level where they are softball-wise. And, he admitted he made a mistake.
Interesting you say that, because that's what I was going to ask you about. Even though he's beloved here, he did leave. He left. He left quickly. Once the offer was made by LSU, he said too quickly. He went down there. He held a press conference. He talked about how great it was to be at LSU and that he wanted to lead them to the Women's World Series Championship, the first for the SEC, the same things he talked about here at Alabama. The decision then to let him return as coach by the UA Athletic Administration, you agree with it?
Yeah, I don't think there's any question about it. Again, he admitted we all make mistakes, and he admitted he made a mistake. Obviously, he came back to UA and said, hey, you know, I really want to be here. Would they have found a better coach than Patrick Murphy? I ask you that question.
Oh, no, I agree with you. That's what I was just going to say. No, I completely agree. You couldn't have found a better fit for Alabama than Patrick Murphy. So if he wants to come back, you take him back, and now I think it is safe to say that he's going to finish his coaching career in Tuscaloosa. I can't ever imagine now that he would leave for any other job if he reneged on the LSU situation. But let's talk about the decision to leave in the first place. His mentor and the retiring coach at LSU, Yvette Girard, alluded to the fact that it wasn't about money, just money. It was about the fact that maybe he didn't feel appreciated. Girard said, quote, coaches have egos. Sometimes a pat on the back or a thank you for what you've done goes a long way. Do you think that might have had something to do with the situation? Maybe he didn't feel appreciated? I don't know how he didn't feel appreciated. He's got a program here where they pack the stands. He's got the best facilities in the country, but she did allude to that.
Well, you know, Gary, when you look at it, though, he has a lot of ties to, you know, the state of Louisiana. And certainly, you know, having that relationship with her, you know, again, I think that, you know, made it a very difficult decision for him. And I'm sure that she made him promises, or there was things told to him that certainly made that LSU job very attractive to him. And, you know, they're probably, in every job you have difficulties. And I'm sure he looked at some of maybe the points of Alabama that weren't so attractive to him. And he thought maybe things might be a little bit different at LSU. And then after he got to think about it, he knew his heart was at Alabama.
Yeah, Girard gave him his coaching start in softball at Southwestern Louisiana, now Louisiana Lafayette. Allison Habits played there. She's from Crowley, Louisiana. I think what happened was, you're right, he got the call. As he said, he was down coming back after losing twice to Florida, and he accepted it too quickly. Once he got down there, he realized it wasn't the right decision. He fixed it, and he's back at Alabama for the long haul. 13 years already as head coach, 2 as an assistant, 15 in the bank, probably going to be about 15 more here in Tuscaloosa. And I do think at some point he'll bring home that Women's World Series championship. Well, Coach Murphy also announced on Monday that Vance Newman, who served 11 seasons as the Crimson Tide pitching coach, will not be retained. That despite Alabama being tied with Missouri and Houston for the lowest ERA in the country during the 2011 season. Now, Murphy said that it was a tough decision not retaining Studeman and that she has been a friend for 11 years, but it was a business decision and what he felt was best for the program. And, Rodney, I think this is a situation with Vance Newman who did a good job. I mean, the ERA was 1.57, you know, during the regular season in 2011, tied for lowest in the country. But she did not go with him to LSU. Word is that he obviously was going to bring in a new pitching coach down there, possibly Stephanie Van Brakel, his former player, who's now over at Sanford as the head coach. If she's not going with you to LSU, you can't, in all logical thinking, come back to Alabama and say, well, she wasn't good enough to make the move to LSU, but she's good enough to be at Alabama. So you can kind of see this one coming.
Well, I tell you what I think it tells me is that he had already made a decision in his mind before he ever took the LSU job that he was probably going to, if he would have stayed at Alabama, he probably was going to make a change at that spot anyway. And again, that's nothing against, you know, Coach Studeman, but at the same time, that's what it would tell me is that he had already kind of had his mind made up. And then when he went to LSU, obviously he didn't bring her, and then now he's made the move.
Well, she did a great job by all accounts, but again, this is a long time. All three of those coaches have been together for 11 years. Coach Murphy and Coach Habits for 13 years. You're going to have some change in the staff from time to time. Again, I have heard strong indications that maybe Stephanie Van Brakel will be coming to Tuscaloosa to be the next pitching coach, but no confirmation on that at all. Well, coming up next on TiderInsider TV, Rodney has his weekly football recruiting update, including an evaluation of Alabama's newest commitment. And still to come, why was Nick Saban caught off guard by running back Corey Grant's decision to transfer? The coach will tell you all about it coming up. And also, we'll get to your phone calls and emails. 205-348-WVUA is the number, 348-9882, or email us at TITV@WVUATV.com. You're watching the show that takes you inside the Crimson Tide, the one, the only TiderInsider Television, presented by Buffalo Rock. We're back on TITV, and you know, there's a lot of Johnny-come-latelys in the recruiting business. Rodney Orr is not one of them. Been following it for 30 years. Alabama football recruiting continues to do so at TiderInsider.com. Since we were with you last week on TiderInsider TV, Alabama with a commitment. Casey Gladney, outstanding prospect. You've written about him on your website. Now, you know, he's got some work to do in the classroom and so forth, but as a talent, he's really a good player.
Yeah, he's probably underrated, Gary, quite honestly. And he's a kid that caught over 50 passes, 16 touchdowns last season, was his best in big games, had 8 touchdowns in 3 playoff games. And, you know, he's solidly committed to Alabama on his end. What he has to do, again, talking to his high school coach, Kemper Amick, is he has got to take care of business in the classroom. If he does that, things should be okay. Some people don't think he's real close, but Coach said he could make it.
All right, let's talk about another Alabama commitment that may be back on the fence. We spotlighted Brandon Green some time ago. You said then, man, worlds of potential. Well, inevitably, other coaches see that as well. And even though he's committed to Alabama, a lot of schools have turned up the heat, and he now says, I may rethink my decision just a little bit.
Yeah, there's been back and forth. There was stories yesterday on the internet after we had our story on TiderInsider about his rethinking the decision. And you know, they kind of contradicted that a little bit. And again, we spoke to him today, and he said he's still kind of in a limbo there. But he's going to be at Alabama this weekend, and hopefully he'll get everything worked out while he's here on that visit.
Well, Rodney, it's so different in this age of the internet. Very rarely are there prospects that come out of nowhere. But to some extent, Darren Lake, big defensive lineman from nearby Sumter County High School in York, just blew up at Alabama's camp. Threw around some guys who were much more highly touted prospects, and now he's got an Alabama offer.
Yeah, you know, I talked to Matt Cochran, who's a really excellent center from the state of California that was in for the camp. Gary, a 332-pound guy. He said Darren Lake picked him up and flipped him backwards on one particular play. So that kind of shows you the strength. You know, he reminds me of Anthony Bryant,
right?
That small school guy. But you know, Darren's an outstanding prospect. Alabama and Tennessee have offered. Darren told me last week after the camp that once he gets everything in terms of his school information to Alabama, his transcripts and those types of things, that he expected that he would probably end up at Alabama.
All right, geography certainly is on Alabama's side when it comes to the young man from Sumter County. Great update as always, Rodney. Coming up, Nick Saban weighs in on a number of issues, including the SEC's decision to further restrict football signing class numbers. The coach tells us why he was not in favor of the new legislation that was passed by the SEC presidents. Plus, your phone calls and emails are on the way as well. Again, the number 205-348-9882. We'll return here in a couple of minutes with more of TiderInsider TV here on WVUA. Well, since spring drills have concluded at UA, the 3 Crimson Tide players elected to leave the program, the most recent of which is Corey Grant, the running back, has not stated where he is going to transfer to, but he is leaving Alabama. Coach Nick Saban told us last week that he was caught off guard by the Opelika natives' decision.
There's really no sort of, I don't know what you would call it there, any reason other than how much he thought he was going to play, that, you know, although I do think he had a role on our team and I do think he would have played, and that was a little bit of a surprise, but we certainly understand and want what's best for him, and, you know, wish him well.
We caught up with the coach last week at his annual Knicks Kids Golf Tournament in Birmingham. Between golf swings, he discussed numerous football issues, including the recent decision to limit SEC signing classes to 25 players. That's the maximum number of new recruits the NCAA allows in school each fall, but schools have traditionally signed more than that. The old number was 28. Before that, it was even more than that. And recruits would either enroll the next season or pay their own way for a year. The new legislation eliminates the possibility of that. Saban and his 11 conference coaching counterparts were not in favor of the new legislation.
And I think this is what a lot of us in the SEC worry about, is when we make legislation like this that's not nationalized, that we put ourselves at a little bit of a disadvantage. Hopefully, you know, the example that we're setting will be something that everybody else sees benefit in, and for the student athlete will want to do as well.
And Steve Spurrier really had a unique idea at the SEC meetings in Destin. He wants teams to pay 70 of their players $300 a game to help with expenses. The interesting part of it, Rodney, is he wants the coaches to pay it out of their pocket. Spurrier, though, got support from several of his peers, including Coach Saban.
He just had that idea and, you know, passed it around, and either signed it or didn't sign it. And I told him right then, I said, Steve, I'm all for this. I'm all for the players, but this is never going to pass. I mean, it'll never pass. You know, and being involved in some of the NCAA meetings earlier with the enforcement staff and the NFL Rules Committee and all that, you know, these kinds of things get discussed, and I think you sort of develop a little bit of a sense of what has a chance, you know, maybe to improve the quality of life based on changes that might be made.
All right, Rodney, let's recap Coach Saban's comments, beginning with Corey Grant. He seemed genuinely caught off guard. I mean, this is a young man, highly touted out of Opelika High School, only spent one fall here, was redshirted, had 4 years of eligibility left, and decides to bail. Your thoughts?
Well, you know, he probably looked at it, you know, when you look at the depth chart, the guys in front of him, we've talked about all those guys, Trent Richardson, on down to Justin Fowler. Certainly, he was probably maybe your fifth guy, but again, he in the role that he could have fit in, you know, possibly, Gary, they talked about maybe in a Wildcat role with him and D. Hart in the backfield with Blake Sims or something along those lines. Possibly he could have had a role. You know, Saban tried to utilize him at cornerback at one time, and that didn't work out that spring. So, again, I guess he, you know, saw the handwriting on the wall.
And as far as the signing classes reduced to 25, we know he's not in favor of that. He wasn't in favor when it was reduced down to 28. And quite frankly, I'm not in favor of it either, but it is what it is.
Yep, and you saw it coming.
Yeah, so. Knew it was coming, and he did too, and he'll make the adjustment there. As far as paying players, certainly out of the coach's pockets, it isn't going to pass. And the problem with that theory, Rodney, is regardless of what people say, if you pay football players, you're going to have to pay other athletes as well. You can't just pay. Right. So that's a long way from happening, in my opinion.
Well, Steve Spurrier's always been an innovator. You know?
He's getting
what
very
an
innovative
idea
there. Of course, you could argue that some coaches have been paying players out of their pockets for a long time anyway.
Yeah,
just saying.
You could.
All right, time to take some phone calls and emails. First up tonight is Joseph in Tuscaloosa. Joseph, how are you, my friend?
How are you doing, Gary?
Doing well.
Yeah, our question is, okay, when's Alabama fan day going to be?
All right, Joseph, they have not announced that yet. That will be coming out later this summer. It's usually right around the start of fall practice. But as soon as we get that information, we will pass it along on our sports shows, mention it on TiderInsider TV. But it's usually right around the start. Usually I think it's that first Sunday.
It is the first
Sunday
starts. Generally, yeah.
Yeah, so we'll keep an eye on that for you. All right, let's go over to Buell and talk with Daryl. Daryl, welcome in.
I just wanted to, how's it going?
Hey, good, Daryl.
I'd just like to say that we all, from Coach Murphy's standpoint, we all make mistakes, but if we don't learn from them, it's our own fault. And he must be a heck of a man to admit on television that he did make a mistake. And Mr. Orr, I like your tie.
Well, thank you, Daryl.
Well said. Let me take a look at that tie. Yeah, it is full of color, no doubt about it. Doesn't lie mine, evidently. I'm going to have to get a little more colorful tie, I guess.
He likes your hair.
Is that what it is? All right, let's go to Tuscaloosa. Stay in Tuscaloosa and talk with our good buddy CB. CB, what's up?
What about it, gentlemen? Is that they going to give old Murphy a little raise and give him enough cheese and let's win a World Series? This last one was a nightmare, brother.
Well, he did get a raise, and he wants to win that World Series very badly, I can assure you of that. Got to take a timeout on the program. We'll be back with more phone calls and emails right after this. Welcome back to TiderInsider TV alongside Rodney Orr. I'm Gary Harris. Let's get right back to the phones. John has been waiting patiently there in Bessemer. John, how are you?
Hey, man, what's going on?
Oh, great, man.
Hey, listen, I was talking about them two players y'all talking about last week leaving. Will I hurt our defense this year?
Well, John, I'll let Rodney chime in here in just a moment. Petey Smith, who was the other defensive player that left?
I've already forgotten.
Well, Brandon Moore.
Brandon Moore,
has left.
Yeah.
You know, quickly, and the quick answer is no, it won't, because they were down the depth chart anyway. Long term, these are two talented players, particularly Brandon Moore. So, you know, if you had your druthers, I guess you'd rather that they were staying. But in the short term, it's not going to affect this defense very much.
No, I don't think, you know, this year by any means. And again, I think Alabama's well suited at linebacker. You look on the defensive line, I think Brandon Moore has a world of potential. I think he's going to be highly recruited out of that junior college after he finishes up. But it won't hurt Alabama.
Yeah, a lot of defensive linemen have been recruited here. Thanks for the question, John. Let's go to Greystone and talk with Susan. Susan, welcome into the program. Email, actually. Email from Susan. How legitimate of a contender is Alabama for the services of 2012 quarterback Gunnar Kiel question? And it's an interesting story, Rodney. Some people had expected him already to have made a decision. First Alabama, then a lot of people said it would be Oklahoma. As of right now, it's nobody.
Yep. And Gary, to be honest with you, to the emailer, I think if you'd asked me this 2 weeks ago, I'd have said it's 95% Alabama. And then he took the unofficial visit a week and a half ago to Oklahoma. That kind of changed things. It looked like he might commit to Oklahoma last week, and he canceled that announcement. And then now there's talk, Gary, of him possibly visiting Alabama again soon. So we'll see what happens with Gunnar Kiel. Indiana's also in the mix because he has some connections to that school. And then also Missouri. They've recruited him really hard. So we'll see what happens.
Yeah, one thing about a prospect like Gunnar Kiel, the schools hold some of the chips, but he can pretty much wait as long as he wants to.
Yeah,
nobody's
number one quarterback in the country.
Nobody's going to pull their offer from Gunnar Kiel.
Right.
All right, one more email we're going to get to before we go to break. George in Tuscaloosa wants to know, will Bama offer Sheldon Dawson from Memphis?
Well, that's a good question. Again, he's an outstanding cornerback, kind of emerging. So, we'll have to see what happens. I know what happens. He came to Alabama's camp, Gary, and put on an outstanding performance there. So, we'll see. But he is an excellent player.
And you said cornerback.
Corner.
Yeah,
corner.
Because those two words sound so much like on TV.
Right.
And corners are about like quarterbacks. You can't get enough good ones, that's for sure.
Absolutely.
All right, we'll keep an eye on what happens with him. We'll stick around. We'll put a bow on this week's edition of TiderInsider TV right after this. And finally tonight, we end on the links. The Farm Links Golf Club in Sylacauga, to be specific. That was the site of this year's Alabama State Am. University of Alabama golfer and Mr. 57. He shot a 57 in high school. Bobby Wyatt shot 5 under par in the final round to finish at 14 under for the tournament. Good enough for second place. Smiley Kaufman also shot 5 under in the final round, but finished at 16 under to win the State Am. Wyatt finished second. One other golf note, Bud Colley, former University of Alabama golfer, playing this week in the U.S. Open at Congressional Country Club outside of Washington, D.C. All right, it's dinner time tonight. Buddy's Rib and Steak in Northport. We'll be heading over there as soon as the program's over. Come out and join us for dinner at Buddy's. And don't forget, if you missed any of tonight's show, there's only one place you can go to watch it anytime you want, WVUATV.com. Our John Huddleston will have the full broadcast posted later on this evening. That's going to do it for TITV. For Rodney Orr, I'm Gary Harris. Thanks for watching. We'll see you again next week right here on WVUATV.